You're not doubting God. That's the part that makes this so hard to explain. You've had moments of genuine encounter, prayers that were clearly answered, seasons where his presence was undeniable. You have history with him, and the history is real. You're not someone who is questioning whether God exists. You're someone who knows he does and can't feel him anywhere. And those two things are sitting inside you at the same time. The certainty and the distance. The belief and the silence. The history that proved he was real and the present that makes him feel unreachable. And you've tried to resolve the contradiction. You've prayed into it. You've read into it. You've looked for the spiritual malfunction that would explain why the certainty and the closeness aren't arriving together. You've assumed that knowing he's real should close the gap. It hasn't. And that's more disorienting than doubt would be. Because doubt has a clear enemy. You could address doubt. You could bring evidence against it. But this isn't doubt. This is something quieter. The certainty that doesn't resolve the distance. The faith that's intact and the presence that's nowhere. And you don't know what to do with that. Because you were never taught that these two things could coexist. You were told that faith produces closeness. That belief opens the presence. That trust is the mechanism. And you trust. And he still feels far. And you don't know what to make of that. Here's what makes it more confusing. The certainty isn't small. It's not a thin, intellectual assent that maybe God exists and maybe he doesn't. It's a full-weight confidence, built on things you actually experienced. The time the prayer was answered in a way that couldn't be coincidence. The moment in worship where something was present that couldn't be explained away. The season where God was so close that the relationship felt like the most real thing in your life. You know what that felt like. And you know this doesn't feel like that. And the contrast is its own kind of grief. Not the grief of losing faith. The grief of losing the feeling of something you still believe is there. Like losing your sense of smell and knowing the flowers are still fragrant. You believe in the fragrance. You just can't access it right now. And the people around you don't quite understand. They think if you're not doubting, you should be fine. They think certainty is the hard part. But certainty without closeness is its own disorientation. You expected certainty to carry you into the presence. And instead it dropped you at the door. And you're standing in front of it with more certainty than you've ever had. And less sense of what's on the other side than you've ever felt. Here's something that doesn't get taught clearly enough. Certainty and felt presence are two different things. And they're not always correlated. The people in Scripture with the most certainty, the ones whose encounters with God were the most dramatic and documented, experienced some of the deepest seasons of felt distance. David had been anointed, had killed Goliath, had experienced undeniable divine favor. And he wrote Psalm 88, the darkest psalm in the entire collection. A psalm that ends without resolution, without a turn toward hope, just darkness and the sense of being surrounded by it. From the same man who wrote The Lord is my shepherd. The same history, the same certainty, a completely different felt experience. Job had a relationship with God that God himself called blameless and upright. And Job described God as hiding behind clouds, as a hunter pursuing him, as someone who refused to answer. The certainty didn't protect him from the felt distance. It coexisted with it, and the coexistence was not a malfunction. It was the specific texture of a faith being held in a season where felt presence was not the primary form of God's activity. What you're experiencing has precedent. The most faithful people in Scripture felt it too, and none of them resolved it by doubting harder or believing more. They held both, the certainty and the silence, together, for as long as the season required. What if felt presence and actual presence are two different things? And what if God is most present precisely when he's least felt, not as a spiritual platitude, as a theological reality? Because here's what happens when God withdraws the felt sense of his presence. He gives you something more durable than the feeling. He gives you the faith that holds without it, the trust that doesn't depend on the emotional confirmation, the belief that stays intact when the experience goes quiet. And that kind of faith, the kind that holds in the absence of feeling, is the kind that goes deep enough to be unshakable. Because a faith that only works when God feels close depends on favorable conditions. The right season, the right mood, the right environment, and that faith, though real, is fragile. But a faith that holds when God feels far. That faith has been tested at the place where most faiths break. And it held. And what held is now stronger than what it was before the distance started. The felt presence you're missing was not taken to punish you. It was withdrawn to let something more durable form in its place. And the certainty you have, the one that remains without the feeling, that is what was being built. Think about the difference between sunlight and roots. A plant in full sunlight grows quickly and visibly. You can watch the progress. The green is vivid. The growth is measurable. But the roots that form in full sunlight are shallower than the roots that form in drought. Because in drought, the plant has to reach. The roots go down further than the water table of comfortable seasons. They find moisture in places that full sunlight never require them to go. And the plant that emerges from a drought season has a root system that full sunlight could never produce. More anchored, more capable of surviving what comes next. You are in a drought season, not a permanent one, but one where the roots are being asked to go deeper than comfortable seasons required. And the sunlight, the felt presence, the emotional confirmation, the sense of God close and warm. It hasn't disappeared. It has been temporarily reduced so that the roots have to reach. And the faith that's forming in the reaching, quieter than what you had before, less felt, less visible, is going deeper than it has ever gone. And when the sunlight returns, and it will, what it finds will be more anchored than what it left. Thomas wasn't there when Jesus appeared to the disciples after the resurrection. And when they told him, he said he wouldn't believe unless he could put his fingers in the wounds. Not because he was faithless by nature, because he was someone who needed the felt experience to close the gap between what he knew and what he could trust. He had walked with Jesus. He had the history. And still, without the direct encounter, he couldn't bring the certainty and the closeness together. And Jesus came back a week later, specifically for Thomas. He didn't rebuke him. He offered the wounds. Touch them. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas touched them and said, "My Lord and my God." And then Jesus said something that has been speaking to people in your exact situation for 2,000 years. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Not. More spiritual are those who don't need to feel. Blessed. A benediction for the people who carry the certainty without the felt confirmation, who hold the belief without the encounter, who stand at the door with confidence in what's on the other side, and stay standing even when the door won't open. That's not a lesser faith. Jesus called it blessed, and that blessing is over you. Right now, in the season where you know and still can't feel. So here's what's true about where you are. You're not in a faith crisis. You are in a faith formation. And the two can feel similar from the inside. The quiet, the distance, the absence of the felt confirmation. But they are moving in opposite directions. A faith crisis moves away from certainty. What you're in is deepening it. The certainty you have right now, the one that holds without the feeling, that doesn't dissolve when the presence goes quiet, that is more substantial than what you had when the feeling was easy to access. You have discovered something about your own faith that comfortable seasons never reveal. That it holds, without the conditions, without the felt support, without the experience confirming what you believe. It holds, and that is not a small thing. That is the thing. The faith that stays intact when everything that usually sustains the feeling is absent. That is the faith that goes all the way down. The one that can carry the weight of what comes next. The one that was being built in you this whole time. And the distance you've been feeling, the gap between the certainty and the closeness, is not evidence that something broke. It's evidence that something is being completed, something that required the distance to build, something that the comfortable seasons would never have produced. Before you go, type these words in the comments. I believe even when I can't feel it, not as a performance, as the most honest statement you've made about your faith in a long time. Because believing without feeling is the most complete form of trust there is. And you've been living it, even when it felt like nothing. Even here, especially here,